Welcome, everybody. My name is Gaurav Banga. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Balbix, and we are a security startup. Done other security startups in the past. So it is my pleasure to have this wonderful panel up here. Before we get started, and we'll go through every company and figure out exactly why we have 6 security companies, but these cloud security companies. One thing I did want to say is, from the outside, it may not be so obvious, but one strange thing about security is it is one of the oldest business problems that we've been trying to solve. So we started solving security 200,000 years ago when the first caveman killed an animal and another caveman wanted that animal. And there began the problem of offense and defense. And while we might think we actually solve the security problem, we really don't. All we do is we manage it to an acceptable level. Security is also very complicated. And as the human endeavor gets more and more complex, security gets more and more complex. It's about not just, think about it as 3.5 billion people fighting 3.5 billion people. Maybe not in that ratio, but something like that. And there are that many more ways to attack. So it's important to understand that security is not one industry. Security is a large number of industries. And in fact, we struggle a lot as an industry because we are all, physical security, security sometimes are all munched together. Endpoint security, cloud security. Cloud security is one of the better things because at least people very early on recognized that it was a different security problem. But nevertheless, it is cloud security, and it itself has many sub-issues, sub-markets inside there. And there are many markets inside of these cloud security type markets which are very large, like several $1 billion worth, several tens of $1 billion worth, because security, everybody needs security. So with that, before we begin, one thing I want to do is there a burning question in your mind for a panelist? This is a good time. Maybe we'll take 2 minutes to go around the room and ask you guys, when you came in, and this is up to 2 minutes, you don't have to spend 2 minutes on it if there are no questions like that. But is there a burning question that you have in your mind as you come here today that you would like to see answered from this group of really smart, accomplished, driven men on mission? Anyone?
Yes, we get started and then
Okay. So let's do this. We're going to get started. Let's go start from that end. We are going to go through all the speakers. We're going to take about 2 to 3 minutes with each speaker talking about what they do, a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their companies, and then we'll go down the room. So.
Hi, I'm Manel with ShieldX today. I've got a big background in network security back from the days when I was working in McAfee and Intel. Back then, we were building the fastest network security appliances until the competition came out with their fastest one. We've actually managed to win Gartner Magic Quadrants and so on. So we've actually held up pretty well with physical security appliances until then Intel acquired McAfee. And at some point, Intel came along and asked us for the 5-year plan because they had a plan on their own to change the data center, to evolve it into new disaggregated, scalable, non-blocking architectures. And then I moved into a software-defined data center group to tackle these challenges, but we were actually not really successful because there was something fundamentally wrong with the security architecture of network security products. And then in 2015, end of 2015, we founded ShieldX to address those.
Thank you. I can't do this sitting down. How's it, everyone? My name's Hoala Greevy. I'm the founder CEO of Paubox. We are the easiest way to send and receive HIPAA-compliant email. The problem we are solving is the encrypted email, secure email solutions in the regulated industry space are vastly overly complicated and introduce too much friction for the sender and receiver alike. We got rid of all the portals, plugins, portals, plugins, and all kinds of friction involved with keywords having to be in the subject line. Our solution delivers a compliant encrypted email straight to the inbox in a readable format for the end user. We've got customers in all 50 states. We've got 700 customers. We're doing 53K monthly recurring. Our NPS score is averaging 72 for 2017. We had a 2.2% annual customer churn in 2016. And we've got comp plans in place to make sure we have our pulse on the market by visiting customers on site. We're in a battle to kill fax machines because in healthcare, those are still widely used, and our solution is down to kill the fax. We're here to help the internet grow up, and we're here to kick some ass. Thank you.
Oh, that was so cool.
All right, so I'm Mike. I'm CEO and founder of CryptoMove. CryptoMove is a moving target data protection. So we've invented a distributed, decentralized data store where when data is saved in, it's fragmented to little pieces, spread out and continuously moving around and re-encrypted. So the idea is that today, data infrastructure is a stationary target. Attackers do reconnaissance, they work through the kill chain, move laterally, map out the data infrastructure, cryptographically attack it, ransomware will destroy data. So instead, we make data a moving target to make that much more difficult for attackers. Our startup was in stealth for about 5 years, doing the R&D. My co-founder and CTO, Boris, was working on it on his own. We also invented a new distributed programming language before CryptoMove. We just launched the market a few months ago. This year in January, we are deployed in the Fortune 100 with paying customers. We're also working with the Department of Homeland Security and some other federal agencies. And yeah, really excited to be here and discuss how security is changing when you get to the cloud and especially on the edge as you approach the cloud and how those models change, and looking forward to hearing everyone's story.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Zohar Alon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Dome9 Security. We are one of the first cloud security companies. We were formed over 6 years ago, solving enterprise problem of how to secure the move to public cloud infrastructure. AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud are the three platforms we help CISOs move their data, move their workloads securely, and essentially enabling enterprises to enjoy the agility of cloud infrastructure and, you know, not having to worry about running Intel-based infrastructure on their own. We've been a partner of AWS since the very beginning, since they launched their marketplace, and we're happy to see them growing and our ability to help Fortune 50 enterprises doing what they do with the enabling and trusting those platforms. I started security over 20 years ago at Checkpoint. I'm based in Tel Aviv up until a year ago. I'm celebrating a year in the Bay Area since our relocation with the family. Dome9 is around 56, almost 60 employees now, and growing strong and hoping to serve each and every one of you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Srini Gurrapu. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Customer Solutions at Skyhigh Networks. Skyhigh Networks is known as a cloud access security broker. It's a cloud security company. The CASB acronym is coined by Gartner, and now that's kind of synonymous for cloud security. What we do is we now help about 600 customers to secure their shadow IT and the sanctioned IT and also the public IaaS infrastructure. By sanctioned, what we mean is, if you're using Office 365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, or Box, we actually secure data and the usage. And about my background, I've been in the security for the past 20 years. After Lucent and Microsoft, I was one of the 3 architects at Blue Coat, and then we built another company called Neoteris, which is an SSL VPN, got acquired by Juniper. And then after that, I ran product management for different companies such as FireEye and Actians. But the last 4 or 5 years have been very transformational for me and the industry, as we're all in this secular trend of move to the cloud. So anytime you're starting a company, the thing that determines your success is what you're doing is actually aligned with some of the secular trend, and the cloud is one of the dominant secular cloud. And about Skyhigh Networks, we started the vision And at that time, when Skyhigh started, I was actually trying to build my own cloud security company, competing with them. Later, I realized that Rajiv, our CEO, is the greatest force and visionary. So I actually joined forces with him. And if you look at it, in the past 20, 25 years of the most recent IT security, not the whatever number of years ago, I truly believe that we've been doing security wrong. And in the security, it's always about protecting your crown jewels. It all comes down to protecting your data. And the beginning of the IT security has started with, we've been relying on your endpoint and the network as a proxy to secure the data. And we all need to pause about that. We were not actually securing the data, but we were actually securing the proxies or the edges, like an AV and the endpoint or a firewall or the proxy. And when I talk to the CIOs, the security is demarcated into two things: infrastructure security and the information security. While we have been trying to secure just the proxies, the patching and the endpoint and the firewalls, IPSs and this stuff, we run out of all the resources. We run out of the budget. We run out of the type skills. And then we never actually secure the data. And when I talk to some of the media companies, when I ask them, what's your security policy today? Which is like, keep all the data inside and keep it forever. That's it. There is nothing that they are doing to actually identify the data or secure the identity and the policies. The reason why I'm excited about the cloud security is this is our opportunity to actually do the security right. As you're moving, and at the end of the day, what does cloud represent? Your data, your app, and somebody else's premise. You cannot even control the endpoint or the infrastructure. And in fact, that's the wrong thing. Leave that to the cloud provider. You focus on your responsibility and the shared responsibility, which is focus on the identity and the usage and the data. And what Skyhigh does is to help with that transformational security paradigm to help organizations understand the risk, give you the visibility of the usage and the data, and provide the remediation controls. And the other reason why I'm also excited about the cloud security is the way we do the cloud security now is very different than what we were doing before. It's all about deploying agents or deploying proxies. In fact, in the cloud, those things will not even work. Now there is a new architecture relying more on APIs, relying more on the risk centering. And that's what I'm excited about. If we move to the cloud, do it right, focus on the identity and the data. And we are very fortunate to have partnered with about 600 customers like the GE and the Honeywells and Morgan Stanley to take on the journey. Thank you.
Good morning. And it's great to be with the great minds here. First of all, I want to thank Dipti for having me here. I appreciate that. And second, Gaurav for moderating this panel. I'd love to make sure that I learn more and as well as we can talk about the journey. A bit about me, and I'll talk about the company, really because there's a story behind every company. There's something happened that makes you start that company and the startup. So my name is Jack Kudale. I'm CEO of a company called Lacework. It's a new introduction to the world about 3 months ago. So we'll talk about the company. So I basically spent good amount of 20 years at CA Technologies. I've ran a few businesses there back in New York. And then for a couple of years, I ran another company as a head of business called SnapLogic, based in San Mateo. I started with Lacework about 6 months ago as a CEO. Company was in stealth for about 2 years, incubated by Sutter Hill Ventures. And we launched the company 3 months ago. We are on our journey all the way from, as you know, as you build your companies, minimum viable product to the traction and to the exact number of customers. But the story, and then the last part about me is I'm still being in a enterprise software for about 25 years, I'm still a student of emotional intelligence. I study every day. And so I learn every day. That's my definition of being a good leader. About the company, right? So this story started about a couple of years ago. And it's a little different being an incubated company out of a VC and starting your own. So I had a fortune of joining about 12 very smart engineers in security and analytics in January. And the problem that we're trying to fix is it's way too easy for the hackers to hide. And especially, and I'll talk about a pressure point. Cloud, adoption of cloud too fast. And then on top of that, it's not that hackers are out innovating us, they are, but it's also the time it takes for them from day zero to the exploit. It's a shortening from couple 100 days to now people call it 100 days. And so we felt like we got to do one thing is let's figure out a way to, since you can't read hackers' mindset, let's figure out a way to track how they behave as they show up. And perhaps we can find them from day 1 or 0 hour. So we now are about just 3 months into our journey, 20 plus deployments, customers. And we feel like, there's a solid tailwind, especially with the regulations, and people call it $1 trillion market by 2021. So therefore, a lot of cloud security companies, Gaurav mentioned there are 6 of us here. In fact, there is at least 1 or 2 coming out of stealth every week. This week was a good week. There were 3 startups in last 3 days. So I'm just fortunate to be here and hope to have a good chat. So thank you. Gaurav, back to you.
You can keep that.
Okay, sure.
Let's get started on one thing that I'm sure is at the top of the mind, which is how do we get started? And I think you mentioned the model, your model, which is slightly different. Before we get to your model, maybe Zohar, maybe you want to start with how you went through your journey of getting money into the bank so that you could pay people and start building the business, getting funded?
It started a bit earlier with the problem. And one thing you can control is you can control innovation. You can control that minute where you get that maybe interesting idea that comes back the day after and tells you, I'm a good idea. You might want to follow up on me. And for me, it happened when I was a web startup. I was involved in doing fantasy betting in the UK market. And one of our servers got snatched, got hit. It was a dedicated server, and I figured out, it can be so easy for the bad guys to kind of exploit us so easily and take control of something we don't have physical control on. And in an area we can't really protect the network as we want, because when you have a server out there before even the cloud days, you protect it you need to protect it from the same network through which this is your only way into it. This is your only way to access it and to use it. And this kind of triggered an idea that I probably had earlier. And the good and bad things for us is that we built a deck, send it to several VCs. It was before the cyber boom. It was, now we're in 2014, we saw an abundance of cyber-related security. And of course, with the addition of cloud and the hype around cloud, it became much easier. But before that, it wasn't so the VCs were probably doing a good job filtering our ability to go quickly to the market. But we were lucky to get probably 2 years ahead of when we should have. We got our first term sheet and we went with it. Actually, it was Opus Capital here out of Sand Hill Road. And this started our journey. So we got the yes from the VC, and it was clear we have to follow up on our idea. It took us a while to get our next round of funding, because then you need to monetize. You need to find a way to show that there's a market. And cloud and hosted environments have shifted a lot. Rackspace was a player. They're now not a player. SoftLayer, IBM, so many companies actually exited the market because there were several others that were changing the game, making it less about servers and hardware, more about software and service. And thankfully for us, we kind of survived that 40 years in the desert and got our Series B funding from actually a group of investors also led here by investors affiliated with Manel Ventures. And thankfully then we could kind of execute on our enterprise strategy, got to over 100 customers today. We have about 300 paying enterprises. And SoftBank realized the potential in us actually they look at the connectivity world, they look at what cloud and what monsters like Amazon, Microsoft are doing to wide area networks. Those are changing as well. The network, the way we consume technology and the way we even access the cloud is changing, and they saw the potential or maybe even the risk of kind of things changing on the MPLS networks, on other things, and they led our Series C just 3 months ago. So now with funding, we feel much more kind of ready to take on the market. But it was a journey we had to go through. I think it built us. So that's our end of the funding story. It wasn't easy.
So just to make it quantitative, from the point of inception to Series A, how long did it take you, and from A to B, how long did it take you, and from B to C, how long did it? Do you remember?
So from the first slide sent to VCs to when we started, it was under 6 months. We already worked we left our day job. We knew it's just what we want to do. Until we finalized our Series A, B, I'll call it, this was a hard three years of showing that we had to wait until the enterprise came in. And since then it was, I think, another year for us to close the C round just now.
So not 6 weeks, not 6 days. So you heard those things, they're not true.
And we started, with my co-founder garage in Tel Aviv, literally same as romantic as it could be. It was, everything happened as we enjoyed the experience as well.
Great. Hoala, you want to say something about your journey?
Man, so ongoing, right? So we're still finishing out our seed round. So we were largely bootstrapped in the beginning. And so we get the money up front, right? You pay a year up front. We get even more cash, offering multi-year deals, 2 and 3 year deals, bigger discount, again, get the money up front. You want to go monthly, we charge you more. So we basically used a lot of customer financing to bootstrap in the beginning. We got into 500 startups last fall, so that was a great validation, get some more cash in the bank. But for us, we're Randy Moss, man. We're just getting that cash. I mean, we got to get that cash. That's how we make our own destiny. I don't know. That's what I got.
And in terms of timing, what would you say?
Raising the seed?
Yeah.
Oh man. So I'm a sole founder. So gosh, it's hard. There's no co-founder to run the business while you're fundraising. So that's an ongoing thing for us. But definitely focused on our customers, getting paid on time by our customers. We do a 14-day trial, not a 30-day trial. We're lucky enough to have a product where you immediately see the value on day one. That's why we shorten the length. We make sure we get the credit card up front. So we're just trying to better systemize our processes around getting paid. And now our newest challenge is, predictably and scalably growing our revenue. So that's our latest thing we're up against right now.
Thanks. And then Jack, you mentioned the incubation model, which is not uncommon, but not very common either. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So it's rather not as challenging. Great stories, by the way. But in incubation model, usually a couple founders, technical founders, working at everyone does incubation these days. Sutter, Hill, Axel, there are many others who do great incubation stories there. And in incubation model, you're basically working there as an entrepreneur, as in residence, great minds. And that's what my 2 co-founders did. They left their great job at Juniper and Oracle. I guess one was at Bromium. They had startup experience at the time. And they built a small, and I remember, I think we were in the same building at Dome 9 for 2 years in Mountain View. Not much sunlight. It was behind Castro. But they built a great technology, and the company was well funded at the time. Sutter deal about $5 million up a Series A, perhaps call it a seed/Series A round. There is a good and bad. The challenge is now that you are incubated company, you got to show progress much faster because you're already at Series A, and there are certain expectations with Series B and then as you move on. So either models are great, and either both models have their challenges. For us, what we did was we were in stealth for about 2 years. Now I believe that you got to stay in stealth until you're ready. But sometimes you can't stay. And like I heard a story of 5 years in stealth. I mean, that's an amazing story how you survived that 5 year in stealth story because market moved too fast. I believe, maybe we would have got out of stealth in 14, 15 months. But it takes 2 years, and you got to perfect the product. You got to have an MVP, the minimum viable product. And we kind of now, we're 1.1 journey. We are announcing 1.1 shortly, and this week, next week. But, there's not much to tailor to the story, but it has its own good and bad being an incubated company.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm not Rajiv, the founder and CEO, but every time I listen to the story of Skyhigh, that inspires me as a fellow entrepreneur. And Rajiv, as many of you know, is a very successful entrepreneur. He built Securend, which is a Zachmal-based company, and Cisco bought it. And then, and that was a Greylock company. And when Ashim and Rajiv wanted to start a company in the cloud security, and cloud security is such a vast thing. So it's almost like an incubated company. But the real struggle, the entrepreneurship journey started after they started the incubation. So the initial thought process, like many of us, is like, okay, let's do a form factor change. Let's build a cloud proxy. Let's build a cloud agent on this and this stuff. But what Rajiv insisted on was, let's actually go to the customers. Literally, he talked to about 150 customers and then looked at all the different problems on what we could. This was in 2012, where the cloud was not really well accepted. Everybody is very concerned about the cloud and the security. He did really talk to 120 people, and they had about a bunch of different ideas, and including doing all the different things. And then there is this wisdom dawned on. So the reason why I'm saying this is there is no substitute for customer discussions and being relentless focus about what is that initial entry point use case where you could actually create the maximum impact. And the first insight that they had was it's not intuitive, where everybody said, when we move to the cloud, the questions that are not being answered by any security technology is that it's very simple thing like, are they doing data encryption at rest? And are they SOC 2 compliant? Every security technology until then, would tell you about, is there a malware, is it in what kind of category? But in terms of their own operational practices of what they're doing, nobody has any visibility. And at the same time, everybody is, signing up with Gmail and, all kinds of, the cloud storage services, but there is no technology out there to answer very simple things about what is the risk of a cloud provider. So then they came back and built prototypes, the founders and the team, and believe it or not, with just the prototypes of what the solution is going to do, there are about 20 large customers that they said, we're going to buy it. And then the journey started, and for about a year to 2 years, there was no competition. We got 100 customers and a lot of. But the thing is, that was not the one time. At Skyhigh, we do this all the time because as the market changes, we again have to have the relentless focus to figure out what is the next big problem to be solved. And this entrepreneurship or the funding or the funding or the stuff, it's a continuous journey. And as market changes, you have to bring back that the founding kind of days.
Thank you.
Yeah, so our story is a little different, and I think every story is really unique. So our company started with my co-founder and CTO, and we're a family business. So it's my dad, and he was a developer for many years. He was at Oracle on the kernel team in the 90s. Different startups. He was a founding engineer of a startup that was acquired by Cisco and made enough money after that to leave and start his own thing. And so he started bootstrapping, and his big idea was to develop, like most engineers, if you have a long enough career, they want to make their own programming language. And so that was something he was thinking about for a long time. And so he created Hello. It's a distributed programming language for highly distributed network systems. And that was a few years he was working on that. And then he actually went around Sand Hill Road looking for some funding, and the VCs don't like to fund programming languages, surprise, surprise. And so he created a killer application. Basically, the idea is, if encryption is not a good last line of defense, we can move the data around and mutate it. And it turns out that was a pretty good idea. We did market validation with CISOs. The concept of moving target defense was really growing in the academic research community, but only applied to networks. So the idea was to move networks and rotate IPs. And so we just were fortunate in the market timing, and it's all about that, that our idea had not been done before, and it fit a lot of big trends. And so then when he needed a business partner, my background is in cybercrime, data breach protection and enforcement for companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft. I jumped in. Our fundraising story was also, not easy. It took a while to first get some smart money angel investors, and then when we got enough of those, some VCs, Tim Draper kind of led our round from behind. And then, and that was like 5-6 months. But then after a while, when we started signing up some customers, it started to get much smoother, much faster for the fundraising. And I think it's all dictated by the traction in the market when we talk to VCs. And the more you can get customers to pay up front, the better for cash flow and things like that.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. Let's move on to the next question. And this is around differentiation, right? So each one of you have had, even though you're all cloud security, you're all different things for the most part, similar but different. When you had approached your markets, when you have gone in, what tools did you have to use if you were to summarize them and maybe we could start with you, Manel. How do you differentiate your offering, the product?
So this is actually tricky because even during funding, we were asked when we presented our solution about multi-cloud security, we were asked, okay, there are 500 of them out there, how are you different? And then you have to have the time and the patience of a VC to actually dig through those differences and the uniquenesses. And it took us quite a number of attempts to find the right VC who had previous experience, who was technical enough, who understood actually that there is a big gap in the current security solutions. And the approach that we took was we explained what current approaches are accomplishing and where the gaps are. And luckily there were things like WannaCry, Petya, and other worms that kept spreading. And obviously there was something missing that stopped them where they are spreading into. And one of the biggest things they spread into is data centers. This is where all the services are running, where you have SMB shares, where you have Windows servers running, and they are sometimes very hard to patch. In our case, we could demonstrate that with our approach, we don't just put our physical appliance into a cloud. I mean, who can do that? And we also don't just convert the physical box into a virtual box, because if you have ever tried to bring up 1,000 boxes in a cloud, you know how painful this can be. So clouds keep changing all the time. So we invented something like an intent-based approach. So the user gives us their intent, and we then realize that intent by securing inside the cloud. So we roll out on demand security services in a microservices-based architecture that are able to scale to the bandwidth that clouds are actually communicating with. So just imagine if you have a north-south boundary, and it's very important to secure that. But if you have a north-south boundary and that gets breached, and it has been in the past, it will get in the future, then attackers can move laterally without any controls. There are other approaches, for example, that try to come up with segmentation, with endpoint security solutions, and they augment very well the current approaches that we are following. And our biggest mantra is that microsegmentation itself is not enough. So we provide the full spectrum of security controls into the data center in a dynamic, intent-based fashion.
Thanks. Michael, you want to say
differentiation? Sure. So from differentiation, our technology is interesting because it's kind of a software-defined storage. And so we have a bunch of non-security technologies that are adjacent. If you've been following some of the cryptocurrency space, there's a lot of technologies like Sia Coin, storage, where they distribute data around. And so that's one area. And then another area is in security. There's a lot of encryption companies. And the way that we have positioned our product successfully to differentiate is, first we say, look, we don't leave the data at rest. The key differentiation is the data is a moving target. The entropy comes from the change over time. And relative to all existing storage technologies, this is a big change, and it fundamentally flips the attack curve. When it comes to the security side, there's also a big difference in terms of strategy versus technology. So many companies are focused on improving security strategies with AI or new methods. But moving target defense is a fundamentally new strategy, where the idea is you shift the attack surface so that you don't focus as much on finding out the attacker. And fortunately enough, there's a school of thought. You can model this with risk-based Markov modeling, and so that's how we differentiate. Is we look for enterprises that really care about their data, that's starting to put it in untrusted cloud infrastructures, and that are open enough to try out a new strategy for security.
And you want to go?
And this Caspi has been one of the most interesting markets that I've been part of. If I look at the Skyhigh or the Caspi market journey, when we first started with the discovery and the risk assessment, literally there was no competition because we had that unique insight and did that. But then the real action started there. And everybody knew that cloud is a security trend. There's probably about $500, $600 million of investment dollars went into this. And then the cloud adoption also increased rapidly. Then people wanted to actually move to the cloud with Office 365, Salesforce, and Amazon. So the business problems kept pouring. And if I actually look at the Caspi as a solution stack, we literally are building about 4 to 5 different companies in a much shorter span. And that's what customers expect you to do. You want to be like a Semantic one to do in DLP, you want to do encryption, you want to do like a SIM and SIM++, and you need to build a proxy. There are so many different things that you need to do. So what we had to do is not only we had to build the solutions, but partner with the customers to be the trusted advisors and then take on the journey. The differentiation at different levels have changed. The first, it was about the unique insight. Next, it's about the customers that we had. And we were very fortunate. The first 10 customers that we were working with are like HP and GE, where we invested in the scale. So now the scale and then the customers become the second tier of differentiation. Then, when we move into the third tier, where we are now at the third stage, it's all about the friction. Because when you are moving into the cloud, some of the architectures become self-selecting, like agent or the proxy-based, doesn't really quite scale to the cloud-centric stuff. So I think it's more of depending on calibrating your market opportunity and making sure that you have different differentiations at different stages of the company has been the secret of success. And then now we are at a fourth stage. Now all the big guys moved into the cloud security. Now Symantec and Microsoft and some of our partners like Salesforce, they all have their own solutions. They made an acquisition. Now, being an independent company with fewer go-to-market dollars than a Microsoft and Office, biggest brands, now how can you sustain the differentiation? So now it's a totally different kind of a game with the proven and the on the best of breed. So I don't think this journey is stopped and there is one differentiation, but I think the differentiation varies depending on the stage of the company and the stage of the market.
That was excellent. Thank you. Jack?
I'll make a quick... so on differentiation, in crowded market, cloud security, just overall cyber security, we felt like just product differentiation alone is not going to cut it. And so at Lacework, we said, look, we got to build a great product, but you also have to build a very unique distribution model. And so let me just quickly describe what that does. So we build what we call the polygraph for data center. In human polygraph based upon certain things, breathing, skin conduct, you can predict if the person is lying. We believe software systems are much more predictable than human being. So you can use software system to predict if someone is actually doing some anomalous behavior. And so you can do all of that great things, and you can build a great product being in stealth for 2 years. But then we said, look, right now in cybersecurity, it takes way too long to evaluate a new product, to then buy that product, and then to implement, and then to every day use multiple hours of every day. So we build what we call is a zero touch, where we don't really rely on a policy to define what should be the trap for a hacker. We don't really rely on rules for anybody to create to figure out how to figure out the malicious activity. Or we don't really rely on logs, because logs are usually afterthought, machine-generated stuff. So we went after the behavior, and so we bringing in what we call is the zero touch to cloud security. That means once it's active, you don't really need a whole lot of effort. And so I believe that you can build a great product, but if you don't have a really good distribution or a way to get there, the differentiation just doesn't cut it until then. So we're still in a very early phase of our journey, so we got to see how it plays out for us.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's move on to, I want to just quickly summarize so that we don't lose track of what we learned from all of us is that product differentiation is a journey, and it's different things, and there's more than one way to look at it. What we also learned from a funding perspective is that is a journey too. In many ways, yes, we are all winners, but we're all survivors, right? So we have to be very, very quick on our feet. And then the third thing that we learned, in terms of our, we have to have an angle, something that's different, and something that got us started. Now let's go on to something. We guys, this panel over here has, I don't know, a century worth of security experience, which is 6 people, unusually. Yeah. So maybe Hoala, we can start with you. Where do you think this is going? What is
Okay. So first job out of college, critical path, email company, First and Folsom. I've been doing the same thing, email, since 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, you do anything 18 years, you better be damn good at it. If we look at the first boom from the early 2000s, you can imagine the internet as a newborn child, unsure of its place in the world, everything's new and bright. Now, fast forward to our second boom, we can look at the internet as an unruly teenager, smoking cigarettes, getting bad grades, getting in trouble, right? But will the internet grow up? Can it grow up? Of course it will. And to me, the why behind Paubox is we are going to provide business leadership in helping the internet grow up. And we believe the internet is headed towards seamless encryption by default, and we've done that for email. And cloud is so obviously a part of the future from a cost and performance perspective and scalability. This is like a no-brainer for us. And that's where I think the internet's heading, and we're going to help it grow up.
Zohar, you want to go? On trends, where is this headed?
It's...
You have been in security like 19 years, 20 years?
21 years. Actually, Ashim Chadna was my boss at Checkpoint for a period of time. I know he's one of my heroes. It was great to be mentored by him 18 years ago. He was actually one of the guys I sent the first deck when we built Dome9, but it was way too early, probably. I think that when I took this question, when we visited the first AWS reInvent, before even the world, we all knew how Amazon gonna dominate that space. It felt like something new, something that's part of something big. This was over 5 years ago. This year, there are going to be like 60,000 people in Vegas in November celebrating the 6th reInvent, I think. And it's going to feel like the beginning again. And this was the experience of the last 5-6 years. We are pioneers, and guess what? We are still pioneers. We still have the majority of the world still using, buying hard drives, buying motherboards and buying cables to build their own data centers, and we know for a fact that they are wasting their time, and they can probably take a bit more, several more years to figure that out. But to make the point clear and short, we're still in the beginning. And that's why it's okay for VCs to pour money into this market. It's okay to have that confusion. We need to think of our customers and the problems that they are having. But we were never more confident in our ability to execute than now. And there's way more competition now, but there's so much more opportunity coming out of the innovators that we work in. And when you see financial institutions, using technologies like Lambda, you ask yourself, they understand something. They understand the power of agility in the cloud. They understand the cost benefits. They understand everything. And if you can walk with them through that journey, because it's going to change, we don't know what will happen in the 36 months from now. And we thought we knew once upon a time. We're in a great position to walk hand in hand, listen to them, and guide them through that future. So we were never been more excited.
I'm super excited, to be part of this journey, and I summarize it in, three things. Number one is, if I look at the move to the cloud and just take an example of Salesforce, and now we all have to think of what were we doing, trying to deploy a CRM system, on-prem. And recently I was partnering with Citibank, now after a big financial customer, they finally gave up. They signed up with Salesforce and says we are paying $25 million a year and we are done, right? So I think for the IT efficiency and the business agility and even for better security, the thing that I'm actually very excited about is now about 60% of the customers actually believe that move to the cloud is going to give them better security. And because now we can focus on the crown jewels, which is the information security, and which is so that's the number one. I think move to the cloud. It's not only good for your benefit, your business, but it's actually good for your own security. That's number one. And number two, what cloud has also done is shift the mindset to be more adoption first. So being a security company, when we were building boxes, all we were doing was selling a box. I didn't really care whether the customer actually used or not. I can go back now and look at the customers. People only consume about 10% of my Blue Code functionality, right? Now with the subscription model and with a frictionless deployment, customers are asking every vendor to tell me what business problems or what business outcomes that you have actually solved. So we all, as vendors, we say we are customer first, but the thing that I'm now focused very much, in the business is adoption first. The onus is on me to prove that you are using the technology and you are getting the business outcomes. The alternative is that the customer can easily switch us and you're going to lose your subscription revenue, you don't have the expansion, then your business model goes down. So this adoption first is enabled by the cloud and the cloud security economy. And peering into the future, to be able to map into the business outcomes, we need to move beyond or above the products and the features. And this is where I believe in the promise of artificial intelligence and the automation, where we need to be able to stitch together multiple different things to map it to a business outcome. So those are the three things, cloud, better security, adoption first, and then the future is about automation and artificial intelligence.
Great. So in the interest of time, I think let's do one final wrap up where we can go around, starting maybe with Jack, and we could summarize. I want you also to do one thing, which is leave our audience with a piece of advice, if you will, on if they want to start a company or if they're about to join a startup. What is it that maybe in a word or a sentence, 2 words, 3 words, what is it that you would sum up your advice for them?
Yep. So again, thanks for having me on the panel. Great privilege to be here. What I would say is, as an advice, and look, I've talked about myself, the company, and the differentiation. You heard from them, the cloud security, just the beginning. This is going to get more chaotic before there's an order here. What I try to do in this, don't take it as a problem, but as you build a company, few things that I learned is how long do you want to stay in stealth? There is a speed. There are a lot of people out there who wants your market, your product, your job, and so you got to compete with that. You got to define how long you want to stay in stealth. And is it 2 years a great time? Perhaps. I think it was just optimal time for us. Some people want to get out in 15, 16 months, maybe a year. As I build the company, what I'm focusing on and what I did, first of all, with, you're a small group. I think some of you guys I talk, you are a one-man show, one-person show, and some of you have like co-founders. The important thing is you got to put a little culture ahead of the product market fit if you can. And the reason for that is the first 20 people can define what kind of company you will become. And it's the snowball effect, right, from then. So what I did first at Lacework, I said, look, we got to at least communicate what is the company and the culture we want to be. I said, number one is you got to have a respect for every individual. So we made a respect as a number one core value. Then we said number two is everyone is here for a single goal. We want to grow this company. So we got to have an implicit trust in everyone that is marching toward the same goal. That means extend the trust first, don't doubt unless the trust is broken. So trust is number two. And a third is you got to have an outrageous sense of urgency. There are a lot of people with more money, more resources, bigger companies, and then there is hackers out innovating what you do every day. And so you got to bring that speed. So I was like, let's communicate to everyone, the first 20 employees, and then the new guys can embrace that is respect, trust, and speed. And for a small company, this might become a little soft, may feel like a soft stuff. It may feel like a little bit of overkill. But if you don't do it for first 20, then you become you let the company become on its own. So you, as a founder, as a CEO, you got to define that initial culture. Lastly, you think, look, I think, I'm walking into this as like, I'm going to be the winner in this market. And so no matter, and to do that, I'm feeling like, look, I got a great market. This is somebody said yesterday, it's $1 trillion cybersecurity market. Physical, cloud, all type of security. Maybe it is. All I know is it's just really big. And someone asked me this morning, there is a new cybersecurity company launching every day. How do you keep track of it? I actually don't. Right? I know what I'm going to do. And so as a founder, entrepreneur, you just go marching and do what you got to do. That's my advice. Any wisdom. But look, we're on our journey growing this small company. We want to be an enterprise someday. And so I want to thank you again, Gaurav, to you and Deepti and all the, nice to be here with you guys.
Well, thank you, Deepti and the Thai team, for giving us the opportunity to be here. And my closing thoughts is, I'm very excited. One advice that I have is, there is a good paper called Cyber Resiliency, and this is a white paper from Gartner. And what they say is, the way we've been doing the security is, very threat-focused and regulation-focused. We all need to move to a different kind of a framework. There are 6 principles of resiliency. I would encourage all of you to read that. I truly believe that the security today, with about 800 different companies, it has become the Frankenstein. And we as vendors, we cannot grok it and leave it alone the customers. The resiliency, security ought to get a lot more simple, and it needs to be something that anybody could understand. What that means is, as an entrepreneur, you can look at it as 800 companies, it's already invested, what is my beachhead to get in? But if you look at the opportunity, all these things are irrelevant. Think that all this stuff is too complex, do this stuff. There is a new way of doing the security, which is the higher critical need. So that's where there are a lot of opportunities. Simplicity, automation, integration, and in the cloud with adoption. And I'm getting very, very excited about the future. So cloud is great for all of us. With the cyber resiliency focus, with the simplicity, is a great future for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I have not heard of Thai before. And when I shared it with my friends, they said it's a great organization. So it really is a pleasure to be here. My point to you is, remember that we work in an ecosystem. We work next to giants. In your case, it's Salesforce and Microsoft with Office 365. In my case, it was Rackspace, SoftLayer, AWS, Google, and Microsoft. We operate in their market, and this is where things are kind of changing. This is where you have new things to consider because it's their playground, it's their rules. But if you do it well, it's their customers and they can be yours. And we have learned that to partner and to make the enterprise sales guy selling that enterprise account away from an EMC VMware solution to come move to the public cloud, which is this is the biggest thing. We are just enabling that as a security vendor. But if we can be friends with that salesperson, with that sales team, whether the verticals they are selling to, we can be much bigger. We can have the leverage that most of our history were about, 10 people organization, we were saying we were 25. So when you're that small, having that pull, that leverage, that help is incredible. And be aware that VCs will ask you, okay, what will you do if Amazon does it tomorrow or if Microsoft does it the day after? And you have to realize that we are a security player. They are not. They're dealing with a much bigger opportunity. They are selling the real deal, and we are enablers. And it's our job not to out-innovate them, but it's our job to show our value in that ecosystem over and over again. And I'm happy to say now that we have. I'm not getting that question anymore from VCs. It's clear what is the value. It's clear that there's a clear line between providing the value and enabling enterprises to consume it securely. And once this line has been set in the sand, we can operate and we can grow our business. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was an awesome experience. The one thing I would say, just looking to the future, is interesting about the cloud is absolutely the early days. And it's shocking if you talk to, when you do customer discovery calls, these Fortune 500 CISOs, that they're on a 3-year plan to start moving to cloud infrastructure. Many of the top companies don't have real data in the cloud yet. But while that's happening, the cloud itself may change dramatically too. And so if you think about what you see today with AWS, Azure, GCP, these are still centralized silos. And so what you might think about is, as the cloud could get decentralized. They're the barbarians at the gate, from the blockchain world trying to create decentralized storage. There are thousands and millions of IoT devices. There's, computing power is increasingly powerful at the edge. And so this whole concept of the cloud might start to trickle down, especially as you move into robotics and connected devices. And it will transform security markets and other markets. One I thought, just in terms of advice, I'm learning every day. The one thing I would say is that startup is a team sport. And it's something that we learned, that we built an advisory board, investors that really have built companies before, and we lean on them every single day. And it's critical because the challenges that we face as a startup is always something new, always something different, and getting good perspectives is really important. Just last week, we had to be in Europe pitching a bank, in DC, talking with one of our customers here in Silicon Valley, and we didn't have enough people. We're less than 10-person startup. So we had to call in our investors to go pitch our company and advisors. And so when you build that early team, it's super important that you're looking for people that can step out of their comfort zone, do things that maybe they've never done before, and that you would trust to basically represent your dream and your vision, because it doesn't take 1 or 2 people, it takes a lot of people.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Dipti, Gaurav, for moderating and having us. Just real quick, I think the future of the internet is seamless encryption by default. I don't see why anything in 2017 needs to be transmitted in clear text. Due to the age of the SMTP protocol that we use for email, that happens way too often. And so we're here to provide business leadership in preventing that. Seamless encryption by default for email. And then as for the advice, I don't know if I'm quite qualified, but the why is important. So why are we doing this? Because we're helping the internet grow up, and we're going to provide business leadership in that regard. We're starting with healthcare, and we're starting with the death of the fax machine. So that's where we're at.
So closing remarks from my end would be that I think the cloud is going to be disrupted again. I agree with you that it could end up in a disaggregated or even more distributed architecture. Network speeds are growing from 10 to 100 to terabits per second pretty soon. That makes the location of the workloads and the applications more irrelevant. It will be denser, so the more cores Intel puts on every single physical CPU, the more workloads you can run. They will be smaller because the operating systems will go away. The application itself will run on a very lean kernel, that's it. That also makes security actually much harder because you can't now move physical boxes somewhere where you send centrally the traffic to for inspection. This is leading to disaggregated even data centers where you can maybe think of memory and CPU being disaggregated on different racks, storage being completely somewhere else, right? Where you could host the CPUs where cooling is cheaper, storage where maybe you have more room. And so I think these are the trends that I see coming in the next maybe 5 years, coming from Intel as well. I would advise that somebody who is going after a security startup that maybe to look at the startup to be ready for that change and for such disaggregated architectures. So we've tried to break up security into multiple different microservices, which is a first start, but I think we're also not yet there. I think if this would happen tomorrow, we would be caught flat-footed as well. I think the industry has to do a lot more to innovate more on the ground rather than on the top outcome. So we have a lot of machine learning startups out there that are based on log analytics and so on. We've heard earlier that this is not really the data that you would like to have if you want to protect against threats. This is more like after the fact. So I'm pretty excited to be here. I'm pretty excited to have the startup around the corner in San Jose. If somebody wants to get over there to see a demo, I'm happy to host that for you as well. And I would like to thank also the panel and Gaurav for moderating that.
Well, thank you very much, and let's please join me in thanking our panelists.